Hey everyone, and excuse me if I sound or look rougher than usual, because I am very sick and I've been the entire week, so bear with me, because yeah, it's gonna sound maybe incoherent at some point. Anyway, this week we've got some interesting stuff. We've got a brand new phone that aims to run Android, Linux, and Windows on the same device, trying to be your all-in-one single computing device, basically. We've got a lot of updates to the Cosmic Desktop happening. We also have Photoshop now being installable and being able to run straight on Linux with Wine, and a bunch of other interesting things, including this message from our sponsor. So this video is sponsored by ProtonVPN. At that point, I would be surprised if you didn't know why you should probably have at least access to a VPN on every computing device you use. It's just much better for privacy, whether you're on public Wi-Fi, whether you want to hide some things from your ISP, make sure they don't sell your data, you want to block trackers, you just want to be private. The VPN I use personally is ProtonVPN because they are fully encrypted, they have a whole lot of servers everywhere, and of course, if you create a ProtonVPN account, you also get access to the entire Proton suite of tools and services, including email, calendar, password managers, storage space, and all of that stuff. They're really a fantastic solution. I have it installed on my phone currently, I have it on all my computers running Linux, they do have a Linux client, they're really good, so check them out down in the description. I can only recommend ProtonVPN. So there's another mobile phone Linux effort out there, but this time it is not aiming to be a Linux phone, as in running Ubuntu Touch or Plasma Mobile, it's aiming to be a full desktop and laptop replacement. So they're bundling Android, a Linux distro, and if you want it, Windows 11, all on the same device, so you can use whichever you want at any time. The thing is sort of mid-range in its SoC, it's a long-term support Qualcomm chipset, which won't give you the best performance, but it will be supported until 2036, meaning you have some legroom before you need to replace that device. You will get patches, security updates, firmware updates for a long while. It also comes with 12 gigs of RAM, which will be more than enough to run Linux or Windows, 256 gigs of storage, which won't be too much, I think, to run both Linux and Windows on the same device, and also you can of course use a micro SD card up to 512 gigs. You have a multi-boot launcher to start the OS you want, and you've got, on paper at least, decent cameras, a 5000 mAh battery, which they say will last for 2 days in phone mode, so on Android. You've got a 6.58 inches display that runs at 120 Hz. Basically, when you boot the phone, you pick from Android to just use the phone as a smartphone, or Linux to use it as your Linux development PC, as your workstation, or whatever else you use Linux for. And you can add an optional Windows 11 for ARM system that will display a full Windows desktop when you plug the phone into a display, and it will let you run most Windows programs out there. With a few exceptions, Windows on ARM isn't perfect from what I've seen online. You won't need to reboot if you want to go from Android to Linux either, because the Linux distro just runs alongside Android from what I've seen. They also developed a Windows mobile UI for Windows 11, so you can actually use that Windows 11 for ARM on the phone's screen itself. You've got the usual Windows Phone tiles, list of apps, the cards for currently running apps. It's not Windows Phone, the applications won't necessarily be designed for a smartphone screen, but at least you have a usable shell for quick manipulations without plugging in into a display. The Linux distro that they include is Debian. It comes with hardware acceleration enabled. You can share your files and folders between Android and the Linux distro too. And also the phone has a few nice other things. The bootloader is unlockable, so presumably you can probably replace the Linux distro with something else. It has dual SIM support, it has wireless charging, 5G, it looks kind of rugged, they advertise it as being able to withstand a few drops and shocks. It comes with a 5-port USB-C dock, so you'll get 2 USB-C, 2 USB-A, and an HDMI port right out of the box if you buy this phone. And they also sell a Next dock, which is basically a laptop without internals. You can just plug the phone into it with a USB-C cable, and then you get a full-blown laptop, except your phone is dangling from it when you carry it around. The phone costs $199 to pre-order. The total price is $549, which sort of seems reasonable for everything you get. Of course, the laptop dock is sold separately. I don't really have a need for this because I don't think I would be able to run Resolve on that and do my video editing competently on such a smartphone, but it does look really cool to have all of these systems at the same time on the same device. I think it's really fun. Like, you've got all your files, all your accounts, all your apps in one single place, and you just switch modes depending on where you need to go. When you're at home, you plug it in onto your monitor, it charges, and you can use a full-blown Linux workstation. If you need a Windows app, you can switch to that, and when you unplug it, boom, it's Android, and you've got all the features of Android. Pretty cool, I think. It looks like Wine is actually making progress to run actual Windows programs, not just games, because a new patch series brings support for Photoshop and recent versions of Photoshop, not an old Creative Suite or Creative Cloud version, or even an older standalone Photoshop. Especially since installing Photoshop on Linux did require you to copy the files from a Windows install, so a VM or an actual Windows install. You couldn't really install it from Linux with Wine. Now the Creative Cloud installer works with Wine and lets you install Photoshop 2025, for example. It seems to include tweaks to the XML and JavaScript implementations of Wine that let the web-based installer run properly using the Internet Explorer backend, which apparently Adobe uses to install the Creative Cloud suite. Now, it is not foolproof. People report that it doesn't always work. It is basically an initial patch series. They say Photoshop 2021 runs really well, but 2025 needs a bit more work. The patches are not upstreamed in Wine yet, they are just submitted for inclusion in a future version of Wine. Right now, if you want to try it out, you need to compile all of this from source, or you need to wait and find a repo that adds these patches before Wine officially accepts them. Still, it is pretty cool, and it does mean that Wine is now at a point where we can actually target specific apps and get them to run, especially with the release of Wine 11, which added a lot more of the 64-bit support that a bunch of apps kind of require right now. Now, it is not perfect, and we can debate endlessly on whether we should or need to run those Windows applications on Linux. If these applications running on Linux mean people will actually come over, because would you really put your entire livelihood and workflow in the hands of one compatibility layer that has been known to break from time to time? We can debate on that endlessly, but the fact of the matter is, if we can bring these applications to Linux, we have a bigger chance of first having them maybe officially supported by the actual developers, because if most of the work is done for them, maybe it gets easier for them to envision porting, for example, Photoshop to Linux using Wine as a wrapper, but also, it means people can just start moving to Linux with that one app that they're missing currently that is now compatible. So it's good work. Now that Cosmic got its first stable release, of course they're starting to bring new features and adding some stuff to make the experience a bit smoother. So there have been 3 updates since the main release of Cosmic, version 1.0.1, 1.0.2 and 1.0.3. These updates bring a bunch of stuff. First, you get system-wide rounded corners, which you can configure. So you can apply those rounded corners to windows from apps that aren't Cosmic apps, or you can decide to not apply them to any windows. You can decide to apply them for tiled windows, for floating windows only. You get configuration options. You also get window shadows, which is really good because it helps with legibility on the desktop. And of course, here again, you can decide to disable those shadows. The Cosmic developers are also apparently working on adding blur, which would basically be added behind translucent elements. So for example, maybe your dock or your top panel, which is kind of interesting. They also released a bunch of other things. For example, when you click an indicator in the system tray, you can now focus applications that aren't on the current workspace. Their initial setup now works properly when you have multiple monitors connected, an issue I ran into myself, which prevented me from setting up Cosmic until I unplugged my laptop from my external monitor. They added an accessibility subpage in the keyboard shortcut settings, so you can tweak those shortcuts too. They enabled tap to click by default. You can purge Flatpak app data when you uninstall an application. They also fixed a few system tray indicators that didn't appear properly. They fixed cursor size scaling in X-Wayland applications. The path bar in the file manager now lets you type network addresses. If you type the tilde symbol, it now correctly refers to your user's home directory. You have a confirmation dialog when you delete something from the trash. They turn the screen reader on by default in the initial setup, which is nice for accessibility purposes. They added a shortcut for that screen reader, which is Super plus Alt plus S. You can type to search in the settings app. The screenshot tool now remembers the last selected screenshot region. You can also open multiple directories in tabs at once in the file manager. There's a new open button. When you open a file preview in that file manager, you can copy timestamps for files. They improved the notifications on the desktop. The audio player now mutes audio while it's generating thumbnails. The terminal better handles passwords. They fixed some problems with Nix flakes if you ran Cosmic on NixOS. Cosmic also improved their support for the XDG desktop portal, so there should be fewer crashes. They also set some flags correctly for Pipewire, which fixes screencasting issues. So a bunch of small little things added or fixed, but those are usability improvements, those are more options, those are just quality of life improvements. And those updates are already available, of course, if you run Pop OS. Other distros will probably take a little bit longer to add those little changes here and there. But obviously, it's reassuring for the future of Cosmic. They do need a bunch more features on the desktop and on the default applications, because they're not on par with what, for example, GNOME or KDE could offer, but they're really close, and this is kind of reassuring to see that they keep following it with updates. They haven't just dropped that thing, and now you're gonna have to wait 6 months to get something else. So props to the team, they're doing good work. Now, apparently the new KDE Plasma login manager will depend on systemd enough that it will not support distributions that don't use systemd. And it also won't support BSD because they just don't have systemd in there. This new login manager will replace SDDM in the official releases of Plasma, and it integrates with the Plasma desktop much better. But this integration seems to come at the cost of compatibility with other distros. Basically, it uses systemd login and systemd user services for managing permissions, who's currently logged in, how many sessions are currently open, all the stuff that a login manager does. And these dependencies cannot be removed from the project. They are the foundation of it. KDE developers said that ideally they don't want to cut support for BSD and other niche Linux distros, but they say that they need to prioritize the best experience possible for the vast majority of users, and this means people running Linux on a distro that uses systemd. Now, don't worry, other distros and BSD can just use another login manager instead of the Plasma login manager. You can still use SDDM, no problem. You just won't get the benefits from the new login manager like keyboard layout support, automatically pairing some Bluetooth devices, stuff like that. Now, maybe at some point the Plasma desktop will have a hard dependency on the Plasma login manager, but I honestly doubt it. They've been pretty modular on how they've built KDE Plasma, and even GNOME hasn't set GDM as a major dependency of the desktop. So I don't see Plasma doing that, which means that for the foreseeable future, this doesn't impact your ability to run Plasma. You're just not going to be able to run the new login manager if you prefer your distro without systemd, or if you want to run BSD instead. Not a major problem, but could be annoying for people who were expecting this thing to replace SDDM. Now, Ubuntu wants to make using NVidia stuff on their distro much smoother and much better. They've opened merge requests for Mutter, the GNOME compositor, to try and improve performance with NVIDIA GPUs. We don't know if this will be included in GNOME 50 or not, but no matter whether GNOME wants to add them or not, Ubuntu will patch their own GNOME implementation with these things in Ubuntu 26.04. Apparently, these patches make using NVIDIA GPUs much smoother on GNOME. It's cutting time where a frame is blocked before the next one is rendered from milliseconds to microseconds, so things should feel much more reactive with much lower latency. Apparently, all conflicts with these patches are fixed, and so Ubuntu expects to add this patch series in their next LTS. They say they have further optimizations as well that they would like to add, and that they hope that this can all land in GNOME 50. Now, it is important stuff because Ubuntu 26.04 will be an LTS release. It will also be the base for Mint, for Zorin OS, for a bunch of other quite popular distributions. And also, since they moved to GNOME 50, it means they're Wayland only. So the experience with Wayland, even with NVIDIA, needs to be the best possible. So hopefully these patches can be merged in GNOME itself so everyone can benefit, but GNOME has often taken a more long-term approach to this kind of stuff. For example, the triple buffering patches were included by Ubuntu for years before GNOME actually merged them, so we don't know if this will be the same here. No matter what, better NVIDIA experience on Linux is good, so hopefully this makes its way into a GNOME version soon. Now, still on Ubuntu, Snap users are apparently getting updates to old, trusted snaps that they installed in the past, but those updates seem to contain malware. Alan Pope, who worked at Canonical on snaps and still supports the snap format to this day, warned that snap malware has moved from creating new accounts to impersonate known apps and names, notably crypto wallets. They've moved into pushing their malware through snaps whose domain names have expired. So basically, the attackers monitor a bunch of crypto wallets for their domain name to expire. When it does, they register those domain names, they ask for a password reset, they gain control of the snap on the Snap Store, and then they push malware through the Snap Store. Apparently, storewise.tech and Vague Entertainment were two such domains. These snaps are crypto wallets, but they became malicious. They mimic the interface of the real thing, but they use a recovery phrase to steal the contents of the user's wallet. Malicious snaps that Alan reported were removed, but this doesn't fix the entry point. That is way too easy to access. Of course, the solution is to either not let your domain name expire. As a developer, that seems kind of important. You could just set up reminders, or just to enable stronger authentication on your Snap account than just a basic password. For users, the fix is to just not install any crypto wallet app from the Snap Store. You get them straight from the publisher's website, or you just don't use crypto at all. Now, this is pretty bad because it's a very easy way to replace a version of an app that is installed on multiple user systems with a malicious version of it. Just because a domain name has expired shouldn't really open that door. So we need some additional security verifications here. I don't know if FlatHub would suffer from the same problem with verified applications through a domain name or not. But yeah, this needs to be looked at because it seems like a way too easy vector to exploit. Fortunately, it's mostly for crypto wallets. I don't think the majority of the population, even using Linux, uses crypto or crypto wallets. But if you do be careful. It's your money in there, so don't install stuff from places you don't trust. Just get the stuff from the developers, not from a third-party package repo on that front. Now, it seems that parental controls are now finished on GNOME. They had already implemented screen time limits that parents can set for their children's accounts, but now they finalized the entire thing, complete with locking the child's session when the time limits are reached. And parents will have to unlock that with an admin's account password if they want to bypass that restriction, where previously child accounts could just log back in again. So what you get in GNOME now is parents can monitor the screen time of child accounts, and they can see on which apps that time was spent. They can set daily limits and a bedtime schedule for each child account. They can lock the child session when those limits are reached, and they can, of course, unlock that session if their kid needs more time on the computer. What didn't make it in yet is the web filtering work, so basically letting parents set filters to prevent certain websites from being accessible to their kids' accounts. They just did not have the time to push that to the Parental Controls app. It will be tackled in the future. Apparently the foundation for filtering websites is there, but they haven't had time to build the UI to control it. Still, it is a nice foundation to get started, and it's rare enough on Linux to be mentioned. Parental controls generally require a third-party application. I've seen plenty of people saying that the state of those is pretty bad on Linux compared to what you could find on macOS or on Windows, even with third-party applications. So having that integrated at the desktop environment level is pretty cool for home family computers, I think. Now, another week, another project drafting an AI policy. This time it's LLVM, the open source compiler project that you might have heard about because it's used by a lot of projects. As they say, they've noticed more and more AI-assisted contributions that they call nuisance contributions. So basically, they're annoying. They say these types of submissions existed before AI tools. It's not just AI making people submit terrible stuff, but they say they could previously handle it without a specific policy. But now there's just way too much, and so they need to filter these things. And so they're moving to a human-in-the-loop policy. This means that every contribution needs to have a human author attesting to the quality or validity of that contribution, and attesting that the contribution is worth the review time that LLVM maintainers will spend on it. Basically, it's the AI is just a tool mentality, but also you need to take responsibility for what the AI spat out. You'll be held responsible if the contribution is trash, you still submitted it, you vouched for it, and you wasted LLVM maintainers' time. LLVM says that they also expect contributors to label their contributions as using AI. Now, we talked about this before. This won't stop bad actors to just stamp a random name or brand new account on any crap or spam contribution that they want to make. There will be some maintainers' time wasted by some AI code slop, that's for sure. But at least as an LLVM maintainer, you can say this person or this account is now banned because they said this is worth your time. It clearly was not. It was absolute garbage. They didn't even disclose the use of AI when it's clearly AI, so we're not interacting with you anymore and everything you submit will be ignored. It won't prevent spam or bad actors from generating plenty of new accounts and just submitting plenty of stuff, but it should at least implement some kind of limit. You can't really fight the AI slop, it's basically impossible, so either you have to have a setup to auto-detect what you think is AI and automatically block it, but in that case you could miss out on some interesting contributions that used AI to help, not just to write everything, or you need to let it in, but you're gonna waste a lot of time analyzing it. It's a really hard line to follow, I think, for maintainers, and it's one of the big problems with AI. It just helps generating so much stuff, but so much of it is trash, and we just do not have the time to vet every single contribution in most open source projects. Those are generally volunteers on their free time doing that. Now, to conclude, the XDG desktop portal spec was updated yesterday to better serve the Linux desktop. First, that spec now includes a reduced motion setting, which means desktops can now implement a system-wide preference where the user can say limit animations as much as possible, and applications can now use and access that preference to disable the motion and animations inside of the application itself, not just at the desktop level, but inside the app. So when you go back one page, for example, in an app, instead of having a transition, you could just do it in a snappy way that doesn't introduce motion sickness for people who are sensitive to that. There's also support for Liniapps in there, this being the flat pack-like packaging format that Deepin has created. It seems to be mostly used by Deepin, but some other distros apparently support it. A developer is willing to maintain that implementation. That means a bit more standardization across the features and the packaging formats on Linux, so why not? There's also a way to configure keyboard shortcuts in the global shortcuts portal. There are more options for the printing portal as well to let you print selected pages or currently active pages in a document. Some permission dialogues got improved text to make them more understandable. There are more translations in the portal spec and documentation as well, and plenty of small improvements and bug fixes. Now, if you don't know, the desktop portal is what lets sandboxed applications access all the features that you would normally have access to, but in a secure way, in a standardized way, no matter the packaging format or anything. It is a crucial part of a modern Linux desktop, so it's good to see updates to that, and it's good to see more standardization and more options so that these portals don't feel limiting to users. And what doesn't feel limiting is the devices from our sponsor, Tuxedo Computers. Tuxedo makes laptops and desktops that ship with Linux pre-installed. They actually choose the hardware and design it and assemble it to make sure that Linux runs really well on all of these devices. They have a big range of computers from the smallest form factor laptops all the way up to high-end workstations, gaming laptops, all of that stuff. You've got a good amount of control on which hardware goes into which device. You also have the ability to have your own logo engraved on the lid of your laptop. You can choose between a lot of keyboard layouts, ANSI and ISO, which is pretty cool too. I only use their devices to do everything that you see or hear from me. They're really, really good, so as always, the link is down in the description. Anyway, this will conclude today's episode. I hope you enjoyed listening to it or watching it or whatever else you were probably doing the dishes or something else, walking your dog, who cares? Still, do take a second to click all of those YouTube buttons and maybe leave a little comment. That always helps the channel. And if you want to really help the channel, there are plenty of links to support it down in the description with plenty of cool perks as well. Thank you all for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!